Hello, I'm Julia Delbecchi, and I'm the Educational Resource Director here at the Ximenez-Fatio House Museum. I also often portray Juana Ximenez, and welcome to our segment, Storytime at the Ximenez-Fatio House, with our very own director, Dr. Roger Smith.
Happy Thanksgiving! You can tell it's a festive family occasion because of the way the table's set. I'm dressed so nice and neat and everything is, oh no. My mom had caught me wearing a hat at the dinner table. It'd have been over. Remember those days? Well, I haven't forgotten them, at least not completely. Well, today we're going to talk about those days and Thanksgiving and traditions and how some traditions we don't quite understand where they come from or why we have them, but they're just so much a part of a holiday or a time when we get together or something we do at school or something like that, whereas there's just this, we do it because it's a tradition. It's always been done that way. And that's what this story is about today. It's called A Thanksgiving Tradition. 'Twas a festive occasion in Gwenfiddletown, the grandest event of the year, the kind you look forward to, grown up or child, and now it was actually here. Today they will honor Thanksgiving, you see, as only Gwenfiddlians can. They hold a great banquet for all to enjoy, every relative, cousin, and clan. The men set up counters and tables and chairs and do all that heavy man stuff. The boys help their fathers so one day they'll know when the number of stuff is enough. The ladies are found preparing the great meal, the mothers and daughters together. It's a grand tradition in Gwenfiddletown with the groceries that go on forever. There's green beans, spinach, broccoli and corn, cauliflower, sprouts and tomatoes, okra and carrots, radishes, peas, celery, onions and potatoes. 8 types of bread with 4 kinds of butter, 12 different salads, 9 cheeses, 3 kinds of melons with neat little balls and baskets of fruit if it pleases. Then turkey with stuffing and peaches with cream, some marshmallows melted on yams. There's cranberry sauce on the yummy meat pies and pineapple glazes on hams. There's chicken and pork, barbecued ribs and seafood in all shapes and size. Dessert, of course, has candies and cakes and fruit inside pastries and pies. But the best tradition they have at this meal that they follow without any grief is how they prepare the main entree, of course, a wonderful slab of roast beef. It's a tradition to cook it a just certain way, a standard above all the rest. It's done in each house on each little stove, and this is what makes it taste best. You lay it out flat on a big cutting board while slicing off 21 inches. Put the biggest slice in a pan by itself and season with dashes and pinches. Place the small piece in its own separate pan. For seasoning, do just the same. Cook for 1 day at 200 degrees and you've made that old hoof and mouth tame. Now down at the corner of Robin and Hood lived the family of Benny Van Boer. His wife Henrietta was roasting their beef with Lily, their child who was 4. But Lily was puzzled and finally asked, "Why do we cook it like that? We have lots of pans that are just the right size, with or without all the fat." "That's a good question," her mother replied. "I just never thought of it much." "That's a good question," her mother replied. "I just never thought of it much." That's how all the mothers teach all of their girls, to give it that excellent touch. "We ought to ask Grandma," young Lily called out. "If anyone knows, it's her. How that can make it more tender and lean, my grandma will know for sure." Grandma Van Boer was in front of town square by the statue of General Baum. Lily could now get some answers she knew to the question she'd asked of her mom. "Why do we carve the roast beef like we do and cook it in 2 separate pans?" Lily was just winding up, Grandma knew, so she held up a silencing hand. "Now calm down, my darling," her grandmother laughed, "and just let me think for a minute. My mother taught me, and her mother her, and she learned it from old Mrs. Bennett." Some other town ladies had heard the remark and passed the same question around. Then one after one, they all realized Mrs. Bennett had taught the whole town. So all of the ladies from all over town decided they all could agree. We'll ask Mrs. Bennett, but please don't delay. She just turned 103. Mrs. Bennett sat at the most honored spot, the official head of the table, for she was the oldest of town folk alive and would be as long as she's able. "O great lady of Gwenfiddletown," the women all humbly began, "why do we slice the roast beef so strange and cook it in two separate pans? Does it make it more tender or fine or lean or give it a juicier flow? We've done it so faithfully, so many years. We really would please like to know." Mrs. Bennett just gasped, then laughed out loud, and she laughed until she had cried. She held her sides as she laughed even more. The lady's eyes popped open wide. "I'll tell you," she said, still giggling loud. "It's not a big deal or great mystery. It's just a tradition at Thanksgiving time, and traditions are part of our history. How long has it been since I first made this meal? Well, too many years to remember. The herbs and the seasons used on the beef grow best at this time of November. And as for carving the meat like we do, well, that's not some magical stuff. It just so happened the beef was too big and there wasn't a pan big enough." The ladies just stared for a minute or two with their jaws dropped down to their chests. They all had ideas what the answer would be, but this one they never had guessed. So before they all could react to the news, Mrs. Bennett rose up from her seat. "Ladies, oh ladies," she said loud and clear, "I will now make this story complete. Many traditions just can't be explained, like leaving your change for the waiter, or wrapping up birthday gifts tidy and neat, just to rip it to shreds minutes later. Why do we kiss when mistletoe's near, or give a young child birthday spanks? Why are some people called Hoosiers and Sooners, while others are called New York Yanks? Tradition, as you have all learned today, may or may not have good reason. We practice it out of respect for the way it's done in the original season. The banquet we have here at Thanksgiving time is the greatest tradition, I'm certain. And as for the men finding out what we've learned, what the fellas don't know won't hurt them." The ladies all laughed and went on with their chores, and when it turned noon, began seating. "This beef is the best," the men all agreed. The ladies just smiled and kept eating.